Well, welcome everyone. And CatchLight, thank you so much for having me here. This is such a huge honor. And yes, I think I am the only non-photographer in the group. So welcome. Let's see. What you're seeing here on the screen is many, many things. It's a photograph, but it's beyond a photograph. It's also memories, it's prayer, it's devotion, it's so many other things, it's hopes and dreams. My work, again, like I said, I'm not a photographer. My first art form was photography, but currently I am not using a camera. Instead, I'm using images that I have inherited or that I find in other places. And as you can see in here, I blow the images up. I use screen printing, which I guess could be considered a photographic process in itself, and then hand beading sequins, beads, and other objects on to the material that I'm using to transform the spaces that my figures that I'm investigating are located within. And I'll get more into that. Again, the materials that I use, they all have a connection to my ancestry. So beads have been significant in both Filipino culture and in African culture. And if you've ever been down to New Orleans, you know that they're also important for the Mardi Gras black maskers as well, and so many other places throughout the African diaspora. I was actually formally trained as an oil painter and started to get a little disillusioned with this material because anytime you go back in history with oil paint, you're going to end up in the Renaissance in Europe. And I didn't find a connection to that. I wanted to go back far into time and find a material that directly connected to my own ancestry, that connected with my heartbeat and with my spirit. I also work with people, and working with people is a delicate process, especially people that are no longer living. This is an image of my great-uncle Joseph, my grandfather's brother. I never met him. I don't know his stories. And when I was young enough to be able to ask my elders anything about him, why he's not here, what he was into, what, where he had traveled in the world or what he aspired to be in his life, I didn't ask those questions. And so the work is a devotion. And I also have to figure out ways to where I'm honoring these people that I could be connected to. Sometimes I'm not when I'm going into public archives for images, but with someone whose name is my middle namesake, there's a deep connection to that person. And so I want to honor them through the work. How this started was when I was 19 years old, a few decades ago for me at this point. My grandmother, I'm gonna tell a little bit of a story in here. I had read an essay by Dr. Deborah Willis about Black photography, and she was talking about how these images were finding themselves into flea markets and in secondhand stores, and we really needed to control our history and our stories and look at the photographs as archives. So I go onto eBay and I'm starting to buy these things. I was really into finding African-American photographs, particularly tintypes. And at this time I was also living with my grandmother. She sees one of these things come in the mail and she's like, "What are you doing? We have these." So she goes into a drawer and pulls out this cigar box, this King Edward cigar box, and she begins to go through these images and telling me the names of these people, what their stories were, how they're connected to other people within our family. And me being 19 years old, I was like, I'm gonna remember this forever. I stashed the box away, and in 2023, I rediscovered this box. I open it up, I'm looking at these images. I don't know who these people are at this point. It's been a couple decades. And so my work is really about looking at these photographs and trying to imagine who these people are or who they were, and realizing also that they are, and this is an adage, sorry, but they literally are the people whose shoulders I stand on that carry me forward. And as I started looking at the photographs, I started to realize that these people were not just human beings. They weren't just relatives. In the photographs, I could look in their eyes. I could look at the expressions that they're making and realize that they had aspirations that we're in 2026. We know what's happening in the world right now. We know about voter rights being taken away. So a lot of this is returning back to the experiences that my family had at the time. But they still had hope. They still had desire. When they're taking these photographs, they're wearing their finest clothes. You can even tell sometimes by the little smile on their face what they're thinking or the direction that they're gazing. And you can start to imagine who they might be and also who they aspired to be. I also noticed that when you're looking at photographs, these are people who are constructing dignity. This is a family that I'm really excited. I learned about them in 2020, the Shorey family. I'm an Oakland native, born and raised, still live in the city of Oakland. I love it. Couldn't live anywhere else in the world. And in 2020, I first discovered the Shorey family. William T. Shorey, who was the father figure in here, was the West Coast's first black whaler. I'd grown up in Oakland my entire life and had no idea that these people existed. His wife, Julia Ann, seated all the way on the right side, was important in the early civil rights movement in the Bay Area, particularly in San Francisco. How did I not know about these people? But what you can tell from the photograph is the dignity that they're creating, their hope, their dreams, their aspirations, and how they represent themselves, how they dress themselves, the way that they're looking back at us through the photograph, and also the props that they're picking at the time for the photograph. I also started to look into publicly accessible archives, such as the Library of Congress. And in this case, looking at African-American images, I realized I may never know these people's names, and I'm definitely not gonna know their stories. Again, looking at them, you can tell their hopes, their dreams, and aspirations. So I started to think, how can I take these images, particularly of people that I don't know, and still honor them, still carry them forward, still imagine what their hopes and dreams were, and somehow make that real for them. Well, photography is not neutral. Archives are not neutral, as we all know. Everybody who's taking a photograph has a point of view, and that point of view gets carried across in the photograph. The person who's consuming the photograph, looking at it, has their point of view, and they're bringing that forward with them. So I started to think, oh my gosh, if I'm working with my family members, how am I not gonna feel like I'm selling them, right? I am an artist who works with galleries. My art gets sold. At some point, it may end up on an auction block, sold in the secondhand market. And I really started to think, oh my gosh, I could be selling my ancestors. How do I remedy this situation and not feel like, continue to do the work that I'm doing and not feel like I'm selling my family out? Well, when we're looking at a photograph, especially if the figure is looking back at us, we have this full access through the gaze of the viewer looking at them. And so I decided to cover the eyes of my figures with translucent material because I like to think that perhaps the photograph is alive. Perhaps these people can see through this image of the photograph, but I don't want people who don't fully understand their humanity to have complete access to them, to easily be able to consume them. So I'm covering the eyes. And if you know about Yoruba culture and Nigeria, which is my huge inspiration, the highest ranked individuals also cover their eyes to protect the common folk from the fiery spirit behind their eyes. Because it's thought that you'd be burned by looking into their eyes directly. So it operates on this double, with this double meaning. And then I also remove the background. And so by removing the background, by covering them with sequins and beads, I like to think that I am transporting them not to the present, out of the time period that they lived in and into a future where their deepest dreams are possible. It's definitely not 2026. Okay, let's cue the video, please. So I just wanted to show what my process is like. It's very slow. all of the sequins, all of the beads, all of the materials that I'm choosing because they have either cultural or spiritual significance, or they have some connection to the energy that I'm feeling as I'm spending weeks and sometimes months with my subjects. This piece right here that I'm working on, I'm still working on it. It'll hopefully be done by the end of the month, but I started it in January, just for context. So as I'm slowly going through this process, it's an act of devotion. It's an act of care. It's also, I like to think that I am getting to learn that ancestor that I may have never met. This is my grandfather, so I did meet him and spent lots of time with him. But for those that I don't know, I feel like I get a chance to know who they were. My work has also moved into installation. So what you're seeing, if you get a chance to go out to Fort Point, which is under the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, I had an opportunity. Can we cut the sound? Thank you. I had an opportunity to cover the Shorey family in this historic Civil War castle that's happening out there, or fort, sorry, it's a fort. And so I started to think about the interesting thing where the work starts to become alive. It's situated in a space that also has its history. And this place happens to coincide with the time that the figures were living. That's when it was built, and that's when the soldiers were out there. And there's this transformative possibility when I'm doing that with the work. So it's a way that I'm moving right now. And this is an image I started working with these archives only in 2023, so they're very, very fresh and they're very new, and I'm still discovering what they mean to me. What you see on the left side of the screen is how I was working for the previous 10 years. At the time when I started making these figures or these works that were not figurative, I started to notice that on the art market, there was this huge thirst for Black figurative art. Black abstract art was not selling so much in the first or secondary markets, but figurative works were. And so I wanted to avoid, again, like I said before, selling Black people on auction blocks. So I started to think about, actually these works are creating this portal. I'm honoring the ancestors. Again, I'm covering their eyes. I'm transporting them into this new cosmos. So the little circles that you see, I view them as planetary beings. Stars, planets, other things, energies around them. And this is the place where their dreams could come true. I also started to realize that as an artist, having my work in galleries and having them in museums and in museum collections, something different happens with my work. Oftentimes, Black collectors especially approach me and they see something in the work that reminds them of their own family. And so this work that I'm making, again, I'm starting off with this photograph. It turns into object. It oftentimes goes back into an archive within the museum, and so it has this life of its own, and it's important to me that people can relate to the work within this context, and also that it's being preserved. So I love museums, big museum nerd here. And video again, please. So I'm also starting to think about what's next for my work. To date, I'm making these relatively static objects that sit on walls or sometimes on pedestals, but they have elements that come alive. You can see in the video that the sequins that I'm using, you could probably see in the previous photographs, you can't see that sparkle and shine. You have to be moving to be able to see that within the work. I also have elements such as tassels and fringes and other items that are really meant to be activated to bring life to the work. So the next phase that I want to do is actually partner with dancers and other performing artists to actually make these things come alive, to be performed. But that takes a lot of resources. It takes time, it takes collaboration with partners, and more importantly, it takes funding that I don't have at this time. So that's where I want to go in the future. And it started to make me realize that for these performances, photography also is important in this process because a performance is very temporary. It has a start and an end, and then it never happens again. But photography has the ability for me to take the work from photograph into object, into performance, and then back into photograph again. And so that's the next place that I want to go. But more importantly, my work is really about honoring people, what their dreams are, and allowing them to become who they really wanted to be. Thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure.